Okay. Welcome back to Solo Roll Mangging, Shadow of the Weird Wizard. Generic Hexcrawl. It's been less of a Hexcrawl, obviously, but that's a thing. You know, a Hexcrawl is a framework. It's a template. But you never are really certain how your players are going to act in a campaign world. You know, when you give them a sandbox, that's the point of a sandbox. So they may gravitate towards the nearest city and want to just set up a shop. So that's what we're going to be kind of looking into today. So I looked at a few options, a few sources for property ownership, business ownership within a fantasy RPG, you know, system. Obviously, it's not a super common thing. I looked at Axe, Adventurer Conqueror King system, which is kind of based around somewhat like land ownership and building up, like, you know, property essentially, and becoming like a conqueror and a king. You know, there's a decent amount of structure in that system for that, but it's on a larger scale, and so it's not really, there's nothing really in there about like just running a small shop, because yeah, again, it's not going to be that common. Most players at level 4 are not going to set up a small shop in a city and just play Racketeer, you know? There is a bunch of stuff in there that I still find incredibly fascinating about mercantile ventures, but it's all entirely based around arbitrage trading. So it's more being about like an active merchant, buying low at a certain location, selling high in a different location, and the traveling back and forth and blah, blah, blah. So that does involve a lot of travel, which means that it's ripe for adventure just by its nature. And that system is actually so interested in that kind of stuff that you can apparently just level up that way. And if that's the game that you want to play, you can just do that. And I guess, like, you could just have one character that's like a merchant, and they do that. But they're on the road, you know, they're adventuring, and then, you know, they get caught up in other shit, but their goal is just get back to another location to sell their goods. I don't know, I find it all very fascinating. And Acts 2, the second edition, came out recently. I'm very tempted to pick it up. I don't even know if I'll ever play it or run it or anything, but I kind of just want to read it. Then I also looked at Worlds Without Number, because this is really just a fantastic book. Just a fantastic resource for any sort of fantasy RPG you're going to be playing. And they do have a section in here about land ownership and domains. It's not as extensive as Axe, but it's not terrible. Again, it's a bit leaning more towards like owning land, like you are taking ownership of like a hex, you know, like you could just acquire one of these hexes on this map. Whether you just go out there and say, I lay claim to this. You know, like I could have just gone to that barbarian camp and been like, this is my fucking land now. And really, until someone else says otherwise, it is. That's how it was in the old days. The old days when Dungeons and Dragons was real. So until some other barbarians come along, some other threat comes along, some other monster comes along, or some other government comes along, yeah, you could just make that your place. What do you do with it? Well, you know, that's up to the players and kind of what they're interested. Why are they pursuing? Why do they want land? You know, what is the goal of having land? Different people find different things entertaining, obviously. So maybe the whole group just agrees like, hey, we should get some we should set up like a whole, you know, village. And maybe a couple of the players are like balanced. Maybe they have ulterior motives. They want to perform experiments and see what they can, you know, do and just blah blah blah. Maybe some people just want to play like, you know, a city builder in a tabletop RPG. There's really, I mean, if you're not aware, there is a tabletop RPG for basically every single genre that you can imagine. Someone has made rules for it in some way, I would imagine. So, you know, obviously D&D is the big thing. And that's the big name, and that's sort of the template that a lot of people just default to when thinking of tabletop RPGs. But you can play tabletop RPGs where you're all just like nobles in 16th century London or something, and you know, and you're all just like having courtly matters. And I mean, there's definitely RPGs that just do that, and there's no rules anywhere about combat or magic or adventuring or anything like that, you know. So yeah, I don't think it happens too often in a game like this, a fantasy, a D20 fantasy type game like this, that players seek out property and acquiring property for one reason or another. Maybe they don't think of it. I'm sure my family wouldn't really ever think of it as like something they could do. But I would say the default for most people playing such a thing and running such a thing is like, hey, we're going to go out on adventures and we're going into dungeons and we're fighting villains, and that's the game. But the game can be whatever the hell everyone agrees on. Now, obviously, if like 4 players want to go on adventures and go and kill villains and stuff, and one player's like, but I want to start a village. It's like, yeah, that's not really going to work. Everyone kind of has to be on board. And so if everyone is on board, including the DM, with going into a city and setting up a small butcher shop and running it day to day, I mean, sure. If everyone is enjoying it, why not? So yeah, obviously most of these rules skew more towards like land ownership, setting up like basically kind of starting your own village, things like that. And Axe definitely goes much more in detail, like I said, about like, hey, I want to just start a village. You know, what does that all entail? What is going to be required of me? And it's quite a bit. It's quite a bit, because there has to be a reason. I mean, you might be super powerful gods among men and things like that. You might be incredible, but there has to be a reason that people are just going to come and live in your village. You know. So usually the hex has to be, you know, either pretty livable, self-sustainable, there has to be arable land and things like that, or there has to be some sort of landmark that has value to people. So like, you know, if there's a mine there, yeah, you could set up a village next to the mine and say, okay, I'm gonna pay you all to come here, live here, work in the mines, blah blah blah, and then I make money off of it and everyone's happy. Things like that. But just like, I'm gonna set up a village in this swamp, please come live in my village, that's not gonna work. So, anyway, World Without Number, the rules here for setting up a shop. It depends on, you know, it sort of glosses over a bit about acquiring the land or acquiring the property, because it depends. It can be, you know, that a lord or something, a ruler might gift you it instead of giving you cash money or magic swords or something. He might just say, hey, well, I don't have a whole lot of, you know, liquidity, but I have this parcel of land that I can give you. And hopefully it's good land, but probably not. And then the players could be like, we're not interested in that shit. We're going to try and find a buyer somewhere else for this land, blah, blah, blah. But it kind of glosses over a little bit about actually acquiring it. You can, if you have enough money, purchase land or property. And it says that it's might be purchasable at 20 times their yearly income. So you have to sort out their yearly income. In this system, it says good farmland in the wilderness is worth 15,000 silver pieces a hex. For comparison, for reference, I did check. A longsword in this system is 100 silver pieces. So that is 10 times our weird wizard numbers. So if we drop that down, that's 1,500 silver pieces in weird wizard, give or take. Which is 1,500 silver pieces is quite a bit, because that's 250 gold, and I think that's probably kind of right for good farmland. I mean, that's all it is just farmland. And you'd have to shell out 250 gold pieces just to get the farmland. And then, you know, setting up everything from there, that's more money. I mean, you could say, hey, dude, come here and work on my farm here. But it's in the middle of the wilderness somewhere. There's no protection of any kind or anything. You know, it's just like... So, yeah, 250 for a hex of good farmland. Then it drops down to like 2,500 silver. So 250 silver pieces in our case, 25 gold for barely habitable land. And this is out in the wilderness specifically, because it says anything better than wilderness is almost certainly already in the hands of one of the Lord's vassals and won't be given over unless circumstances have justified a forcible confiscation. So yeah, if we look at our hex map, all of this territory, you know, around the city is already it's accounted for. Pretty much all the stuff along this trade route in general is accounted for. Because I think, yeah, this is the trade route one. Apparently there's a guarded town here. So I wonder if this is the trade route. This land route here. There just happens to be this orc camp and not a very good trade route. This was just a randomly generated hexcrawl, right? If you were actually going to design a map with things like that in mind, you probably don't want to place things entirely randomly like that. But whatever, let's pretend that's the trade route. So pretty much everything in this whole region, more or less, is kind of claimed and accounted for. And is not really considered wilderness too much. Whereas over around here, all this stuff, you know, this gets a lot more questionable. Because this is a village here that's been ransacked. So this further southeast, this is all Borderlands kind of stuff. So it's all, you know, technically, you know, under the king's domain or whatever. You know, he lays claim to all of it because no one's arguing. So he can grant land here. But also, if you just set up shop in one of these hexes, really out in the Borderlands, chances are no one's really going to even care. Anyways. We're sort of getting off topic here, but again, this whole video is kind of just about ownership, so it's fine. So it says that a business or agricultural land will generally produce 5% of its purchase price in income each year, assuming nothing goes wrong. Thus, a 500 silver plot of farmland will produce 25 silver worth of income over the course of a year, usually mostly around harvest time. In the same way, a shipwrights factory that commands a 50,000 silver sale price would return 2,500 silver a year under ordinary circumstances. These are clear profits earned after the normal expenditures of hiring farmhands and business employees and buying materials. Each year, the GM should roll 1d6. On a 1, something will go wrong the following year, and there will be no income unless the PCs can fix whatever the problem was. If a business enterprise rolls a 1 2 years in a row, it will completely collapse unless the PCs can act to save it. Agricultural land never collapses like this, barring its military loss or conversion into a wasteland. Yeah, and that's pretty much, those are the rules. I mean, they're pretty simple, but again, like, this isn't Axe. It's not really a major focal point of 99% of campaigns, so it's not too important to delve into more than that. Now, there is another section here somewhere. Construction costs. So this is what it costs to construct various establishments and things like that, from good, safe farmland for a family all the way up to a major fortress. And again, this is all in silver pieces. So a humble peasant cottage costs 50 silver. If we divide that by 10, that's 5 silver pieces just to build a little tiny cottage. Now, this reflects ordinary costs for purchase or construction materials in the places normal for each structure. A wealthy peasant's farmhouse would cost far more than 200 silver to build on the costly land within walls, while a city townhouse could perhaps be had for a quarter of the price if it were built in some rural village. These prices also assume that materials can be had relatively close to hand. A PC who wants to build a wooden manor house in the midst of a savanna may be disappointed, while one who wants a stone watchtower in a place that lacks any nearby quarries may have to undertake great labors or greater expenses to have his way. Again, always follow the fiction. So, I was going to cross-reference something here, and now I'm trying to remember. It was something money related. Fuck, now I forgot. Oh, right. I wanted to look back up how much the average peasant makes yearly. Okay, so the average worker earns about 200 copper a year. So that's 20 silver. If we're saying that a humble peasant cottage costs 5 silver, that means that the average peasant could afford, well, no, I mean, peasants are kind of, I don't think they have a lot of spending cash, you know, a lot of that just goes towards taxes and things like that. Food is pretty important. So, I don't know. Do we think that's correct? I mean, are we happy with that sort of conversion? I mean, a prosperous peasant farmhouse would cost a peasant's entire annual wages, which would take them essentially years to save up for. So maybe that's correct. That is a peasant farmhouse. Good safe farmland for a family would be 50 silver, which they basically would just never be able to afford themselves without some sort of dowry or, you know, something like that. I mean, yes, I guess that's probably okay. An urban slum dwelling would be 25 silver. But this is construction cost or purchase cost. Yeah, I mean, I get it is more expensive to live in the city, even in a slum, right? Obviously. I think think this is all relatively acceptable to me. So we see there a modest city shop, 1,000 silver, or 100 silver for us. 10 gold. That seems fairly light, but 10 gold to a peasant is an absurd amount, right? Like, they would practically never be able to afford that. Skilled trade persons can earn as much as 600 copper per year. 60 silver. So even for them, you know, they'd have to save up a few years just to get a little shop in the city. Maybe that is correct. Maybe I just have far more money than I imagined. And maybe this guy was paying me way too much, but I mean, hey, very few can do what we can do. So we're worth it. We're freaking worth it. So, Amada City Shop, 100 silver pieces, which is 10 gold. We could just buy that outright. So maybe maybe that's what Lord Thomas does for us, is he's just, okay, he's like, I got this shop, I will sell it to you because, you know, you've been good, we're good friends, blah, blah, blah. But I don't know, I don't know if he would sell stuff, right? He'd rent it out. Or well, no, I mean, yeah, I guess he would sell it. We just still have to pay taxes and stuff. But if why would we pay taxes to him? Don't we pay taxes to the king? So, I don't know. I guess, yeah, maybe he does both. He rents out some of his property, but he's also willing to sell it, you know, for the right price and blah, blah, blah. So if we didn't have 10 gold, you know, maybe he would just rent it out to us, and we'd have to pay it back. We'd have to pay monthly. So, okay. So he's going to sell it to us for 10 gold. So let's just deduct 10 gold. Now, with that in mind, our shop costs 10 gold pieces, 100 silver. If we go back to land ownership, a business will generally produce 5% of its purchase price in income each year, assuming nothing goes wrong. So, 100 silver, 5% of that is 5 silver. That means this place is making us 5 silver per year. Which is, that can't be correct. That number can't be correct. And the problem is conversion here. Because that means that we are earning less than the average peasant. We're earning like 4 times less. Granted, that is profit, but still, that's not really enough to live off of. So I think our numbers are off because we're mixing systems a bit too much here. And maybe the divided by 10 is not... Because our entire conversion metric is entirely based off of the price of a longsword, which is not necessarily concrete between all systems. So I don't think we can necessarily go off of that. Let's pretend, briefly, let's pretend that we did no conversion. I think it's kind of ludicrous, but let's just roll with it. So in that case, 1,000 silver pieces for the Modest City Shop, 100 gold. Okay, so then, you know, let me add back on the 10. So we could not afford 100 gold to purchase this thing outright. And this business would make us 50 silver per year. 5 gold. Is that too much? I don't think so. The average peasant earns 20 silver per year. We'd be earning 50 in the city, running our little modest business. And it says skilled trade persons such as masons and weavers, or educated people such as scholars and priests, can earn as much as 60 silver per year. So I think, yeah, honestly, it's kind of right in that pocket. We're not like a big shop or anything. It's just a modest little shop, probably not even on Main Street or anything. It's just off the beaten path. This is modest beginnings, and we can't even afford to purchase the place outright. So it's probably a bit more correct. So, you know, if we wanted something more like on Main Street, like a nice, you know, double size shop or something like that, I could see that being more like 5,000 silver. And it's going to earn more because it costs more. It's a simple system, but yeah, I can agree that that probably works out mechanically just fine. Now, the thing is, it's not really abusable, right? Because it's basically, you know, it's like that Key and Peele sketch where they're talking about robbing the bank, and they just, you know, he talks about like getting hired there and working for like 30 years. Like it's not really an abusable system because it's just you're living the normal life of an average person in the setting for however many years. And then it's like, okay, let's spend 20 years working this shop. And then we'll have all this money and we'll buy, you know, amazing stuff. Not really. After 10 years of this sort of profit, you'd have 500 silver, assuming nothing goes wrong. So, 50 extra gold. You have to, if you purchase this, if we purchased it outright for the full price, we'd have to spend 20 years just to recoup what we spent. It's not actually becoming profitable for 21 years. But at the same time, it's like, what do you expect? You know, what do you expect? This is why, you know, you are usually going adventuring, because it's far more profitable in a very short amount of time. It's also incredibly dangerous for the average person. So, yeah, this is not a get-rich-quick scheme. This is not a money-making scheme. And true, the thing is, you don't have to work it, right? And the price, the profit, and all that numbers, that's assuming that you are having someone work it for you. You have a guy running the shop. You have a blacksmith running your blacksmith shop that you own and stuff like that. This is really more of just an investment. It's not assumed in any way that you are like running the shop day to day. You buy this stuff, you invest in it, you continue to adventure, and you know, so on and so forth. Again, like the average campaign probably takes place over the course of like 3 months. So it's kind of pointless, but the whole thing is kind of pointless. But that also means that you could own 20 businesses. You know, if you have enough cash or you are gifted enough stuff or whatever, you could own 20 businesses that you're hiring people to run, and you just collect 20 business profits at the end of the year. The issue is, of course, that each one of those businesses is going to get this D6 roll. Yeah. So, we're not... It shouldn't really ever be something players are doing because they think that it'll make them wealthy. There's just no real good way to handle that, and it just doesn't make any logical sense. So it's more about, we want to do this because we find the process interesting, or we want to do this because it could be narratively interesting based on some things that might arise from opening a business or running a business or owning land or blah blah blah. That's why I think Axe focusing more on like arbitrage trading when it comes to business is just generally a much more interesting process, because it can still enable adventure. But okay, let's go with the unconverted numbers. So 100 gold is what it would cost to purchase this shop outright. So in that case, we cannot afford the property. Can't afford the lot in the city, and we can't afford the actual building itself. Maybe we can afford one or the other. But I think this is going to be a rental. He's going to rent this property to us. He's got a shop. Maybe the former tenant, something went wrong, or he died, or the business just failed. That's very possible. So he's got an empty property in a lower class part of town that he is willing to rent out to us. Now the question is, do we count that as part of the... That's part of our 5%, right? If the PCs own property on land that's meaningfully controlled by some other power, they can usually expect to pay 5% of its total worth to the local ruler each year. Exceptionally powerful PCs may be exempt from this. The ruler doubts his ability to make them pay. Nobles and other title folk are often exempt from these taxes as well, and often sore point to the common gentry and merchant. Now it says, usually expect to pay 5% of its total worth to the local ruler each year. How does that work? Because we're only making 5%. And that might just be for general property. That might be for houses, various things like that. I don't know if that's counted in when it comes to this separate section of business income. I don't know. There seems to be a bit of a disconnect there, and I'm not quite sure. But let's just make it easy and assume that it is included in all that sort of stuff, and it still remains at 5%. So I think the only real upfront costs we have to pay here, then, are just like for the business itself, like whatever equipment we need, furnishings that we need for the business, signs, whatever is involved in setting up a shop outside of the actual construction of the building itself. So we need to figure out what kind of business we're going to be running. And so I picked up this other book, The Tome of Adventure Design. And this thing is pretty insane. I mean, this book is 514 pages, and it goes over like a cajillion things. Yeah, it's mainly about designing adventures from the ground up, but it also just has random tables for like everything you could think of in a fantasy setting, including like building entire cities and blah blah blah. And so I was looking at here through the city stuff, and I saw there's a D100 roll for a type of business within a city. And I thought this might give us a few good ideas. Basically, Truco's kind of happy doing whatever. He's probably reasonably good at anything. Of course he is. That's why he has trickery, he's good at everything. Balance, I think she doesn't care because she's not really going to be involved. She's going to be doing her own projects in the basement, in the cellar, or whatever. So her only real demand is that it's not something that smells. Like, nothing with a really foul stench, like a fishmonger or something. for a tanner. So, let's just roll a D100 and just kind of see what we get. I don't know why that's not, I guess. Okay. 99. A wine merchant. That's a little tricky without, he'd be a middleman. That's kind of out of his purview. Yeah. No, I don't think that'll work. 85. A stonemason. It's not really... I mean... Stonemason. Maybe? But it's mostly, like, on site, right? I mean, how much does he do at the shop itself, then? Yeah, I don't know about that. Okay, let's keep going. 67. A navigator? Nope. 16. A blacksmith. Well, yeah, he could just be a blacksmith. I suppose that's simple enough. There's probably 1,001 blacksmiths in the city, but he could be another blacksmith. That's the leading one right now. Let me roll one more time here. An inn, no. Although kind of interesting. An armor, that's pretty similar to a blacksmith. I said I was going to roll one more time. Teamsters, 48. A goldsmith. A potter. Okay, that's also kind of interesting. He makes just pots. Blacksmith, bit more manly though, for sure. Let's go with blacksmith. It's fine. All right, he'll be a blacksmith. We're gonna open up a new blacksmith. A T&B blacksmith. Actually, Balance would of course insist that it's B&T, even though she's not involved. That's life. Okay, so B&T blacksmith. So what do we all need then? You know, you got to set up an entire forge. That's money. We're assuming, obviously, then that the previous business was not a forge. Or was not a blacksmith, or didn't require a forge or anything. So, yeah, we have to buy all that, get that all set up. That's all going to take a lot of time. I don't really even have an idea of what to charge. Like, if that was like, if I was DMing and the players were like, all right, we want to set up this blacksmith, I don't know what that would cost. Don't really even have an idea of what that would cost. Eventually you just kind of have to throw out a number, right? Like, it just has to be a number. Are we assuming the construction costs here, it's for purchase, or construction materials in the place is normal for each structure? Don't know if that's fully furnished. Oh. Find the total price of a structure. Delving just add up all the 10-foot cubes or other spaces involved and price it accordingly. The costs include ordinary furnishings or functional equipment appropriate to its nature and function. That's if you just want to do any sort of construction, not one of these. So I think a whole shop, including the building, you know, and everything in it, that costs 100 gold. We have the building, so how much does everything in it cost? 25% of that? Let's go with 25%. Fine, fuck it. So, again, at a certain point, you just have to spitball a number. So 25 gold. That's what we're spending to set everything up. 44. Okay. We still got way more money. Way more money than this place will, like, ever give us. Now, after 10 years or something, it'll do alright. Because the whole thing, in 20 years, it's going to be 100 gold. Nothing else goes wrong. Okay, so we've got, I'm picturing a 2-story building. You know, not very large, but a 2-story building. And, I mean, would you just have a forge indoor? That doesn't seem right. I guess if it's really well ventilated, but this seems questionable now, what I'm doing, logically. I think most forges are outside, because there's a lot of fumes and heat and stuff. So I'm not quite sure how this all works. Maybe blacksmith is the wrong choice. Maybe pottery is better. Okay, fine. Fuck it. Since we're just renting out, we can't redo the building to get a forge going here. So yeah, screw it. We'll just go with a potter. B&T pottery. All right, so we got all that set up. We got a pottery wheels and, you know, clay shipments, and I don't know anything about making pottery, so I have no idea, but hand wave, we purchased everything. So the main floor, that's where all the pottery gets made and showed off and all that stuff. The cellar, that's where Balance does her activities, studying dark tomes and performing rituals. And then upstairs is the bedrooms where they sleep, and they just live here now. Okay? And that's it, and we could skip forward 20 years if we want. I mean, not really, because of the rules that we see here, where we have to roll a 1 every, or we have to roll a d6 every year, and on a 1, something's going to come up the following year. What would come up? This Worlds Without Number doesn't really go into much detail about what could come up with owning property or anything like that. And actually, hold on a second. I'll get it. Just hold on. Here. Okay. Heroes of Adventure, which I was originally considering. I was originally going to go with these rules for property ownership because we've used them before. You know, they're equally simple. But these, you roll an event every quarter. And so these are events, which you can ignore if you want. Whereas the other one, Worlds Without Number, is if you roll a 1, the following year has a big problem, and if you don't solve it, you don't make any money that year. So it's kind of not really avoidable. Here, though, the events every quarter can be potential good things, potential bad things, and it gives you a big chart of all the opportunities / threats that might arise, and what you risk or are choosing to ignore, such as a medium risk of loss or a large opportunity, so on and so forth. So I actually think this is probably a better system, but it's definitely more hands-on because this is every quarter. So I think if your players are more just like, yeah, we want to own some property and just, you know, maybe fuck around a little bit with it, but we're going to keep adventuring. I don't know. It's hard to say because years rarely go by within a D&D or an RPG campaign. It's just a very uncommon thing for players to say, yeah, we skip by 5 years. That just doesn't really happen that often. And if it does, they either just want to skip by 5 years because they want to make money off their businesses, and they just want to hand wave it, in which case probably the D6 system is better for that. Or, you know, they really want to be involved with the business and that wants to be kind of a focal point, in which case it would be much better to roll every quarter here for an opportunity and threat, because that's going to keep popping up interesting scenarios. I think for our purposes, probably we want to go with the D20 rolls here every quarter, because this is kind of our focal point for a bit. So let's just do the first quarter of our business. B&T Pottery, starting up. Truco, you know, of course, he's good at everything, so he's got some nice looking pottery. Balance has been studying her dark tomes, settling into life in the city, getting used to things. We got plenty of spending cash, so I'm sure we're living it up a little bit. And she's obviously, you know, he's enjoying just having his own business, being able to settle down here and not, you know, threatening his life every day. You know, this is kind of what he really wanted. She doesn't have to do anything, and she just gets to enjoy city life and study her dark arts. Just resetting everything. All right. So a quarter goes by, a few months go by. Business is all right. If we go by this chart, if we, you know, instead went by this system, we'd be, you know, in the shop category right now. So every year, at the end of the year, we would roll a D4, and that would be how much income we make, and we would deduct 2 from that because that's our maintenance cost. And then if there was anything left, if there was a positive number left over, that would be our profit in 1,000 silver pieces. So very possible to break even. It is even possible to have a loss generated, which you either have to pay out of your own cash or generate a side quest to meet the obligation somehow. We have to, like, do more work for Lord Thomas to cover it. And then best case, we gain 2,000 silver pieces. Now, that's probably a bit much. I think we'd have to cut that down to 200 silver. But even that is way higher a number than Worlds Without Number is operating. So I feel like World Without Number is a much more realistic system, all things considered. And it's not really nearly as variable as this could be. So I kind of am okay blending the two. Anyways, so 3 months go by. I'm going to roll the opportunity / threat. 17. Information, spy / insight. Now, does that make sense for a small fucking pottery business? Not really. And most of this will not make much sense. So, I'm gonna re-roll that. 3, a scandal / celebration. Okay, and so you can think like, okay, there's an upcoming festival or something like that, that we are trying to vie for, yeah, I don't know, a stall in the festival or something like that, or we're trying to get our pottery specifically displayed as part of the celebrations, something like that possibly. And then if we roll the risk, 16, it's a medium opportunity. Certainly, yeah, to get our pottery out there in a prominent position during a major city festival. So what is the side quest then, you know? What is the small adventure related to doing that? If I just tell players, like, okay, there's an upcoming big city festival, and there is an opportunity for your business to, you know, become more known if you can secure a position with the city to display your pottery, use your pottery to, like, you know, I don't know, be part of the art display or to hold flowers or, you know, who knows what along the promenade. I don't know, something like that. And if that was all I said, like, what would players do? Be like, I don't know, we go to Lord Thomas and tell him to get us in there. That's not really an adventure. So I think that's kind of tricky, and this is part of the trickiness of just running a business, and that's why probably easier many times to just hand wave it and do, you know, the D6 system, where most of the time it's just like, yeah, business as usual, nothing too exciting. I mean, you could always, if they're gonna just go to Lord Thomas, he can always just whip up some other job for them to do in exchange, you know? Like, okay, but I'm gonna need your guys' help with something. Blah, blah, blah. And I guess you could keep relying on that, and it's like, okay, we're continuing the adventuring thing, we're continuing quests, missions, and it's kind of indirectly here, you're doing it because you're helping out your business. It kind of depends on the group, you know, and I would imagine a group playing Shadow of the Weird Wizard or Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder or something like that. They're probably, hopefully, still interested in doing quests and adventures. Because if they're not at all interested, they're like, no, we really just want to run this shop. And it's like, okay, then I think we're pretty much done here. You know, it's like, okay. I think we can all agree that we're outside the bounds of a normal tabletop RPG campaign here. Because it's like, then what? Like, we just sit here and, okay, 50 years go by, you make some money and you retire, and now we start a new campaign. Like, you know, and this is a retirement, and ideally characters do reach a point where they retire, but that's usually not just at level 4 in the middle of a campaign when there's a lot to do. So yeah, I'd probably lean more towards just doing another job for Lord Thomas, assuming the players were okay with that. I don't know. I mean, again, it's like, obviously, this is why this doesn't come up that often and why there's not that many rules or discussions about it happening. Because typically that leads to just boredom and ennui, you know, of just like, yeah, we're sure running this pottery shop in the city. and things are happening out there in the world, but we're not involved. I do think it's interesting in a certain way. But I would also say that running a small pottery shop in the middle of a city is not the most ripe opportunity for exciting side quests and adventure. Compared to running an inn or something in the borderlands, you know, right on the edge of civilization. Or like we did in that other campaign where I started up like a zoo for magical animals. I think the zoo overall was a much cooler idea. I had a lot of fun with that, of like, okay, we're going to go out and get a griffin now. And we're going to go find this rare and unusual animal that no one's ever seen before, and we have to capture it. Like that, there's a lot of, anything that can help steer players back towards adventure, but with a unique twist on it, I think is pretty good. Running an inn on the borderlands, that could lead to plenty of interesting encounters at the inn, but it could also very easily lead to, like, okay, the inn itself is just entirely getting threatened by, like, encroaching orcs or who knows what. So if players sat down and said, like, hey, we just want to open a pottery shop in the city, it's like, okay, I'm potentially maybe on board temporarily, but we have to have a discussion about what you're hoping to get out of this and why you want to stop adventuring to open a pottery shop. And in my case, we were led to this because I felt that this is what Truco and Balance wanted. As characters, and also because I wanted to bring up the idea of starting and owning property again. Realistically, this is probably where the two kind of just retire. I do think Balance's activities could lead to something catastrophic. And really, if the players were like, sometimes, you know, if you get into role playing and things like that, it's kind of just like, yeah, this is where these characters would retire. This would kind of be the end of their story. Then I'd be like, okay, awesome. Then we'll make some new characters, and I may even use this as a springboard, because maybe Balance's activities and her dark rituals really get out of hand, and she ends up like wiping out the entire city. And our new characters start out as like refugees or something from the city being just annihilated by some dark ritual. That's exciting. You know, an RPG should pretty much always be interesting or exciting, at the very least fun. Again, this situation is just really almost never going to arise, because there's no way that a normal group of players will all agree that, like, hey, we want to settle down and open a pottery shop in the city, and that's where our characters retire. It's just not going to happen. So I'm at a bit of a crossroads here of what to do. Do I just kind of end this campaign because it was the story of these two characters and this is kind of where they end? Do I keep going through with the business and seeing what kind of things arise from that we have to kind of work with Lord Thomas some more? Or do I just say, okay, that was interesting for a moment, let's just let's hire someone to run the shop and let's go back out adventuring? I'm not sure. I'm honestly not sure. There is still a lot of potential for the rest of this Hexcrawl that we haven't gotten to. We are only level 4. Retirement seems a little strained. So, I mean, you could do it. You could... if the player's like, okay, that was cool, we did it, you know, but now we kind of want to move on, then it's like, okay, you guys worked the shop for like 2 years or something, and then you realize that, man, you really miss adventuring. You miss being out there and risking your lives and on the flying by the seat of your pants and all that kind of stuff. So you decide to just move on from the city, blah, blah, blah. I'm just trying to decide personally the option that I'd like to go for. Looking over the rest of the Hexcrawl, things that we haven't uncovered. There's some ruined caves here. There's some ruined barrow mounds here. There's some more barrow mounds with a sorcerer in them. Then there's a village with an age-old guardian. There's a ransacked village. Another landmark for a religious cult. A holy shrine, also with an age-old guardian. A guarded village. This would be on the coast, not in the middle of the sea. A guarded town nearby. And then an ancient dolmens besieged. Interesting. Do I want to do some more freeform stuff at one of these like barrow mounds, or I mean, probably more the ancient dolmens. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Or at the ransacked village or something. Or do we run like another module of some kind? Because those are always a little fun as well. Or do we want to do another job for Lord Thomas and just roll that up and see what happens? Maybe something again in the city. There's a lot of options here. Let's look at the Tome of Adventure Design, because I think this had some stuff. Okay, so it goes into city adventures, right? So there's 3 types of city adventures. One is a shopping trip, which usually isn't an adventure at all. And usually you're just like, okay, you're doing shopping in the city. But, you know, something could happen while they're just inadvertently doing their shopping trip. Then there's mission adventures, which is what we've been running, where there's like, we're in the city because we have a specific goal here. We have a specific quest or mission that we're intending to do here. And those usually have 2 phases, the information gathering and the combat phase. And then there's exploration adventures, which is where players decide to wander randomly through the city to see what they find. I don't think I've really ever encountered that, but that's always because I'm typically very laser focused in what I want or what I'm looking for. So it's not like, and I don't think I've ever said like, yeah, I'll just wander around, see what I find. That's not really me. Then it goes into actually creating a city. So there's a lot of things that it's like, what it's known for, its specific details, things like that. So this is like what it might be known for. So if we rolled for our city, the nameless city here that we've got, 76. So this is known for the severity of the laws here. And that's like its big notable feature. It goes into discussion about cities and what players remember. It says players do not remember details. So you hit them with something really memorable, a memorable quirk of the city. And as a general rule, a city should almost be a caricature of itself. Focus really, really hard on the city's central characteristic, at least until the players have it drilled into their heads. And I agree, people generally do not remember that many details. So you want to hammer down one specific thing. That's also true for player characters as well. It's very difficult to make like a realistic person as your character. And that's why it's much easier, much better to just have one or two quirks that you really hammer home and focus on to make the character notable. And that's true for like NPCs as well. But then you can also roll to see like if they use unusual animals here, such as giant ostriches. There's odd customs of dress and to whom it applies. Odd behavior amongst the citizenry. An unusual cultural center of gravity, such as obsessively focused on cleanliness or sex. Then, for the city design itself, you can roll for an interesting aspect of the streets. And either like the layout of buildings or decorations, aesthetics. You can roll for various city districts. Then like a key open area within the city, such as a gladiator arena or a graveyard or a political forum. Obviously the business lists that we saw. Civic buildings, religious areas. Then you get into events within the city, such as the latest news going on. So if we roll for the latest news in our city, 81, there's been a series of kidnappings taking place in an area of the city. So that's the latest hot news off the press, but it's possibly untrue. Then faction wars. So this is things like a mob against the municipal leaders, a noble house against the temple, religious leadership against a criminal group, species against species going on. Then we get into the abstract city encounter generator. This generator is much too open-ended for use at the gaming table, but it can be useful for designing your own city encounter tables, if that's the way you want to handle running your city. So it has a type of encounter, whether it's with craftsmen, tradespeople, farmers, criminals, performers, the complication of the encounter. And then the complication involves or is based upon beliefs, past events, unexpected events, item. Then you get into this massive table of possible crimes or criminal charges. If you need some sort of crime to come up within the game. Like they need to help out some guy and he's been arrested. And he's been arrested for breaking and entering. Or he's been arrested for escaping serfdom. Cattle theft. You know, you never know. You might need some random crime. There's a big fucking D100 table for every type of prison imaginable. Such as here. The prisoners here are fed to a huge, bizarre, cell-like creature that disgorges them again upon command. Yeah, that's a memorable trait, isn't it? Or upon sentencing, prisoners are fed a poison that requires administration of a temporary antidote every few hours to avoid death. Upon release, they get the permanent antidote. Big table for generating minor gods. So it's a 4-part table that has the names such as Hulashta, the Fire of Mercy. Big thing of religious processions and ceremonies, what they're carrying during it, what they wear during it, accessories, the sounds they make, the reason for the ceremony. I mean, this book is just insane to have. Just PDF, at least. I don't know if it's actually a physical book that they printed I kind of doubt it because it's 514 pages. Pretty big. I don't know if Drive-Thru RPG even prints shit like this. Types of temples, reasons why ground is holy, administrative functions of larger temples, temple structure, nature of... I mean, it's just like every table you could possibly conceive of wanting. Oh, then you get into food. Big table for the bill of fare, the specialty of the house for lower class, middle class, upper class, or a banquet. So lower class might be having fish stew, not entirely fresh, where the middle class might be having purple worm steak with mushroom gravy and wild greens. But if you go to the fancy banquet, you're eating fillets of giant python with thinly sliced potatoes and horseradish cream sauce. Then tribes, nomads for smaller settlements, smaller, encampments. And that's it. Then it moves on to like planar adventures and stuff. Yeah. Didn't really go over adventure design too much. That was all city stuff. So adventure design. You're trying to figure out the location of it necessarily. If that's more like if you go to a location, it's like this, again, this book is mostly for DMs doing prep, right? This is not really meant to be used at the table to come up with stuff on the fly. This is stuff that you're planning, like, okay, I want to put this thing in my world. I want to put this adventure location within my world. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. I don't know what the mission is, really. I just want to come up with this cool location. So you're going to roll a few times on this thing, and you get that it's a I can't read. It's a bazaar. It's a bazaar of the bitter assassin. That's the name of the bazaar. And then you start fleshing that out, or you just re-roll because that's not what you really had in mind. You might instead want a island. Ooh, an island of the gluttonous spawn. Okay, and that might trigger some creativity in your brain. And that's a lot of what this book actually is it's meant to just spark thoughts, which is often what I was using like Heroes of Adventure for in the random quest generator. But for the actual quest, and then you're going to be more looking at this mission section. So, like the first thing here is the type of mission. So there's individuals, an individual-based mission, an item-based mission, where the goal is all revolving around some sort of item, a location-based mission. So the goal is centered around a location specifically, and then an event-based mission. So if we want to just come up with a random adventure, no thoughts in my head of what it might pertain to, we'd roll here, we'd get that it's an individual-based mission. We'd roll on that table then to get find a missing. So we're finding a missing person. And the individual subject of the mission is going to be a secret agent or spy. So some sort of spy working for some government or organization has gone missing, and we'd have to assist with finding them. So this would probably be a mission, in our current situation that Lord Thomas would come to us for. Like, okay, he has spies, of course. He's got individuals that creep around, doing recon work for him for various purposes, and one of them went missing. And so there, that's sort of the basis of this adventure. And so then they have this massive D1000 table of patrons and targets, which is just, this is like every type of like person that you could possibly think of. Like, there's like 8 entries here for celebrity figures. Artistic, foreign, genius, in hiding, local, magic-related, sport or contest. And it's just, yeah, massive table. D1000. You don't see those too often. The motivations of a patron. So if I didn't have a Lord Thomas figure here, but we were kind of known, we had a reputation or something like that, we might want to, I might try and figure out, like, okay, who's hiring these individuals? Who's hiring the team to try and find this person? And so you'd roll for the motivation for this patron. And it says removal of kidnapping. I'm not really sure what that means. Or regain honor stolen by a guild or business association. That's if you really needed a motivation. In our case, probably they just want their guy back. So we don't really need to think about that too much. Hooks and motivations. If you need an extra, you know, obviously we're here. Usually the hook is pretty simple for many things. It's just money or heroism, one of the two. But if you need something a little bit more exotic or specific or something about that, you could roll on that table. How characters learn about the opportunity. Again, in this case, it's because the guy is coming to them to hire them, but there might be, that might not be a viable thing for a mission that you have in mind. Obviously, many of the choices possible here are potential employer contacts party to offer the opportunity, because that's going to be the most common way that a party gets hired. Then we go into the villain. Because in this case, the spy or something went missing, and we haven't figured out where he went missing, why he went missing, or anything like that. And so it could be just something, he got into a dangerous situation and he inadvertently got, harmed in the process. So there doesn't always necessarily have to be a villain that was consciously enacting a plot here that we're meant to intervene in. It depends on we'd have to flesh it out more. What exactly was this guy spying on? But I think many times that is going to involve a villain. And this table, if we were to roll on it, wouldn't necessarily be the reason that he stopped the spy or anything. It's just like, that's incidental, probably. It's more just like, what is the villain of this mission and what is he up to? And if we rolled on this table, we get 42, economic power. Okay, so this is obviously going to be something related to the city, something to do with another powerful individual within the city that is seeking to gain more economic power, more wealth. But again, we're operating within a city currently. So all of our thoughts are probably going to lean more towards within the city rather than this was a spy that he sent out into the wilderness for no reason, And so, yeah, in our current situation, from Lord Thomas, that sort of mission is going to lean more towards political intrigue and other noble houses again. If we don't like that idea, if we want to try something different, then we should have rolled a different mission type. So we could go back to the drawing board then, go 95. It's an event-based mission now. Survive or overcome a criminal conspiracy. Again, pointing towards the city. So you could just keep rolling until we got something that would lean more towards out of the city. Again, another event-based mission. Hide evidence of what really happened in a recent, I assume, event. Yeah. Probably leaning toward the city thing, but not necessarily. The event subject of the mission A furtive, stealthy raid. Again, probably leaning towards the city. Yeah, probably. I could maybe think of something outside of the city with that, but it really... I locked onto Lord Thomas as being kind of the patron here, but doesn't have the mission doesn't necessarily have to come from Lord Thomas, but I would have to come up with something. Okay, a location-based mission. There you go. That could be outside the city. 43. Get supplies to an archaeological dig. That's definitely 100% outside of the city. Now, getting supplies to an archaeological dig is not the most exciting mission for, you know, a party of D&D characters at level 4. So obviously, the location there has to be something more involved than just bringing supplies. We're not errand boys. So in that case, maybe you want to reroll on the mission without rerolling on the subject of the mission, the archaeological dig. So you're going to keep re-rolling until you see something there. Liberate doesn't really make a lot of sense, although it could work. Stage raid upon an archaeological dig. That's kind of interesting. That could work. Rescue hostages from an archaeological dig. Boy, oh boy. I mean, all of this kind of gets some juices flowing of creativity, I gotta say. Assault an archaeological dig. Explore an archaeological dig. Well, that's sort of the most kind of generic, you know, yeah, I mean, that's like your classic generic kind of plot of an archaeological dig. I had some locals working there, digging up this so-and-so location, and then all of a sudden, all of them quit. They all fled in terror, blah, blah, you know, something like that. I want you to go investigate. And then that leads into a classic dungeon-based mission, if that's what you're interested in. That setup is not super original or inspiring or anything like that, so the actual location would have to be pretty interesting. So then you could go back to your location list and try and come up with what's a really interesting location that they could delve into. A foundry, maybe? Dungeons? No, that's a little too on the nose. A prison? Okay, maybe a prison could be something interesting. An old underground abandoned prison? Prison of the Immoral? Prison of the Immoral Bishop. That's the name of the the underground prison. Prison of the Immoral Daughter. Okay, maybe. Prison of the Immoral Scholar. Immoral's kind of a little light of a term. Let me see here. Prison of the Iron. Prison of the Iron Sun. Okay, I mean, that's something. I don't know. I think it's a really... I mean, I spent a bunch of money on this PDF, so I just wanted to show it off and go over it a bit. I do think it is really interesting for just coming up with original adventures and just kind of springboarding for creativity. But at the same time, I mean, ChatGPT is pretty handy as well. And also just running modules that other people have written. This is definitely for someone that wants to create their own adventures from the ground up, and they just need some juice to kind of kickstart it. Anyways, going back to the villain's plan. So then it goes over all of the specific results here in more detail. So they're trying to conceal something. They're trying to convert people's hearts, minds, and possibly souls. And so then you have further tables of like, for here, the conversion method. So how they're trying to convert people. So if our villain is converting people to his ways, he might be a money lender or has control of money, and he's using their debts to force them into undertaking evil actions. You know, that's pretty villainous, I must say. He might be desecrating an important location. Might be trying to just destroy a community, and his intended method of destruction is through poison. How villainous. Even poisoning water, food, air, animals, crops, clothing, etc. His reasons for destroying the community through poison is because he irritates the villain because it's too happy and cheerful. He's the fucking Grinch. I wouldn't go with that one almost ever, unless that's like the tone of your campaign. Then you have this whole thing for his reason for seeking vengeance against a community. He was imprisoned for a crime he committed. Like, okay, I mean, you committed the crime, so he might seek to destroy a particular association of good aligned people. So he's really targeting anyone disregarding a particular evil-oriented law, such as a requirement to wear an evil symbol or worship an evil idol. And so his intended method of destruction is arson, directed at a building, holy site, or meeting place of the community. So on and so forth. Evoke catastrophic events, gain political power, just random acts of villainy if he's just like insane. And so he's just gonna commit unplanned assaults when the opportunity arises. He's a serial killer, a highwayman, an ambusher, a violent what the fuck is that word? Oh, kleptomaniac, yeah. Yeah, so there's a lot of options. Then it gets into an entirely different category of adventures and villains and stuff, and that's monsters. So you've got the big table of monster categories. So you might want to focus around oozes and macrobiotes. I know this really just became a let's read, but I'm quite fascinated. So then it goes into each type of creature, each category of creature, and they all have, you know, a bunch of different tables and discussions about them. So if we go to oozes, including slimes, molds, jellies, puddings, and other such icky things. So then you have a table for the body shape of an ooze, and it might be a cube. You have a cubic ooze, a gelatinous cube, you might say. Then it's immunity. This might have a specific immunity to blunt weaponry. And then the degree of immunity, it has a percentage chance of not being affected by blunt weapons. Not entirely that interesting, but okay. And then it has a special attack, of course it does, which is to spray or spit. And you roll for the effect on special attacks table 279, which is way all the way down here. Special attack type. So you roll on that. And it's a big old table. Chunky table. This table alone, it's like 10 pages. Emotion. This special attack induces rage, either by taunting, mental manipulation, or temporary insanity. Look at all this text just for one special attack type. So you've got a gelatinous cube that spit causes you to go into a rage. That's kind of unique. I want to go back to the oozes because we weren't quite done there. Okay, so we did all that. Then you have the name of the ooze. 2 parts. It's called the Indigo Curdle. It's an Indigo Curdle. Okay. Then you go to macrobiotes, which I guess includes limbs. And so our macrobiote takes the form of a water balloon. It's water balloon-like in shape, but it has jointed legs. It's sort of weird. Then you just have ideas for macrobiotes. Some microscopic organisms carry eggs with them. This is a weird creature we have here. And that's it for oozes and macrobiotes. So pretty much any type of monster that you could really think of. You have a D100 for basic types of undead creatures. Look at all these types. Look at this. 17. Corporeal, semi-intelligent, non-reproductive. I think that's just skeletons. I think you're just describing skeletons there. But what about 44? That's incorporeal, semi-intelligent, non-reproductive. That's basically ghosts. Okay, is there anything unique here? There's gotta be. Semi-corporeal. Okay, well that's already like, okay, semi-corporeal, non-intelligent, non-reproductive. We got a lot of non-reproductive. What's a reproductive one? Nope. That's there's a lot of non-reproductive. I would imagine. I don't think much about undead reproductive stuff. I keep rolling this and I continue to get non-reproductive, so that must be just more common. Oh, here you go. Semi-corporeal, non-intelligent, reproduces through prey. That's pretty frightening, I must say. I'm not even really sure what that creature would be, but it's scary. Causes of intelligent undeath. There you go. Rejected from the underworld for some reason. Alright. Preparations for intelligent undeath. Breaks in the life cycle. So we're really just trying to come up with, like, this isn't like I have an army of skeletons or something. This is like we have one weird fucking undead creature. So we need to figure out his whole backstory and stuff. So he died after committing a crime, inciting to riot. Okay. The manner in which he died. Alright, there you go. He was executed by live burial. Whew. Well, he did incite a riot. Okay, anyways. So then you get into all the general monster tables like we just saw. So their overall combat profile, like all the different types of possible attacks or ways that it could attack. Like its tongue. If it has a tongue attack, what does it exactly do with its tongue? It pierces and injects acid or poison with its tongue. It's pretty bad. The delivery method of a special attack, such as through its spit in a line, or through touch. That's a common one. Or through a ray from an eye stalk, or other organ. Or through speech. Then the big giant table of special attacks. Again, this is really like big prep time DM that wants to create entirely original content. You know? But they don't want to just come up with it off the top of their head. And I don't blame them, because I can't do that shit. And I think all these tables would be really helpful. I don't know how much use I'm ever going to get out of this book, specifically, because I don't tend to create stuff entirely originally. But it just seemed like such an interesting book to go through that I couldn't resist. Special defenses and abilities, transformations, distinctive attributes, such as it's blind or has extraordinarily good hearing. Social organization of sapient monsters. If you want to come up with an interesting, like, goblin camp that might have a different organization. You just roll here. This is, like, really typical one. The tribal divided leadership between a spiritual leader and a war leader. Or, morphocracy. Creature with longest legs, arms, tentacles is the rightful leader. There you go. I mean, that's an interesting goblin camp. Their leader just has, like, abnormally long legs. Okay. Then you get into dungeon design. And that's an entire fucking ball of worms. There's a lot that goes into making a good dungeon. Yeah, there's quite a bit that goes into that. I still can't imagine ever designing my own dungeon, because I mean, people have been designing dungeons for 50 odd years, you know. Why would I even bother? There's so many really good dungeons out there. Countless good dungeons out there. And I don't particularly like dungeons that much. So it's not like a big focal point for me. But yeah, you can just see how many details and things go into, or that can go into designing a whole dungeon. You know, these codes and ciphers you can put in, and then you get into the actual, you know, map design of the dungeon. All that other stuff wasn't even discussing layout or rooms or anything. Ridiculous amount of information here. Then you go into actually designing. This is just the dungeon. That's not getting into the dungeon adventure, which is the players and characters actually going into this location and why they're doing that and what interesting things they could find and stuff. Clues and blah, blah, blah. Oh my god, it's just so much here. This is like halfway, this is not even halfway through the book, by the way, at this point. Waterways that might be in a dungeon. Unusual doors and mechanisms for, you know, normal door, unusual mechanisms. You really need to specifically design all this stuff. Teleportation effects. All this stuff for the names of areas within a dungeon. If you need to really come up with a good name, and then, okay, this is the Predator's Laboratories. Area names involving imprisonment. Okay, so this area is known as the Red Oubliette. Area names involving bugs. The larva pits, I guess. Basic stairs. Unusual stairs, of course. Strange things. Yeah, there's a lot. There is a fucking lot. I can't imagine how much time this all took to put together. Tricks. Trick is something that requires the players to make meaningful decisions that isn't a monster or a trap. Can range all the way from a sliding corridor to a riddle written on a scrap of parchment. There are an infinite number of ways to try and break down the broad concept of a dungeon trick into a series of tables. After literally years of screwing around with it, I've decided to compile my tables into 11 categories. Architectural tricks, bargain and persuasion tricks, experiment tricks, false appearance tricks, hazard tricks, magic area tricks, magic thing tricks, run the gauntlet tricks, substance tricks, wager and game tricks, and written tricks. And then it goes into what all those things are. So, like, what's an architectural trick? Any sort of oddity, you know, involving architecture. So the central feature of one might be a wall, and it falls to reveal an entrance. Okay, it's not particularly amazing, but it's something. That's a trick. Here's a ceiling that has 2 entrances or apertures with different results. Okay. Or a hole that moves to block party from going back or retracing steps. A moving hole is pretty weird. Then you get into complex architectural tricks. This is 4 rolls to determine something. Jesus, so it's a wall. Okay, how does it function? Put proper chemicals, minerals, or elements into the place where they are processed. Okay. What happens when it's functioning? Anti-gravity. What is accessed? Chamber with monsters. Alright. I don't know how you'd put that all together, but sure. So yeah, obviously many tricks. And then into traps, which are very different. Oh, we didn't even look at the fucking disease table. Look at all these possible diseases. First part of diagnosis, second part of diagnosis, relevant symptoms, and the natural recovery time. Specific courses of treatment for normal diseases. Lethal and virulent diseases. You can come up with awesome disease names like the watery privates. Damn, I don't want that. No one wants that. The sapphire boils. Yikes. The twitching plague. Oh, the twitching plague. Okay, this doesn't sound that bad. The blue pimples. Okay. The watery tremors. Alright, yeah, anyways. Then, yeah, into traps. That's a whole thing. Basic mechanical traps. Such as room that fills with sand or gravel. Okay, well that's, that's fairly classic. Mechanical traps with concealment and complicated triggers. So the trap is concealed in an alcove, and the complicated trigger is a pressure plate with weight on it, releases when weight is removed. So, like the Indiana Jones Raiders of the Lost Ark opening kind of thing. Then different gases. This massive table of gases. So a gas that burns your skin and reduces your charisma permanently. And it fills a cubic area, dispersing rapidly. Sounds pretty nasty. Liquid traps. Fast hardening resin or concrete. Missile traps. Okay, arrows that are poison lethally. It's not particularly original, but I don't know if any of these are going to be particularly original. There's only so many missile types you can come up with. I mean, they got grenades in here and spiked cannonballs. Pits. Every type of possible pit possible. An uncovered pit with an ooze or slime at the bottom. I've definitely seen that in dungeons. Lethal poison effects. Other than just being lethal. You might want to know specific. So this one does damage, a lethal quantity. Causes hit point damage each round for a predetermined number of rounds. Successful saving throw means the damage is only inflicted once. There you go, but there's so many options. Internal damage. Victim fails a saving throw. He suffers internal damage and must make a saving throw every time he suffers damage from another source. Non-lethal poison. Such as a poison that causes short-term confusion, or a reduced ability to resist disease, short or long-term. Basic traps with rigged natural features, such as a wall or fence blocking their path. And safe path only works for the first couple of people, after which it becomes dangerous or impassable. Basic magical traps. Magic trigger, such as an object sends a message, it activates a trap when the object is picked up, opened, etc. And the effect is paralysis. I mean, so on and so forth. We could sit here. I could record a 5-hour video just going through this book. I don't know how interesting that is, but yes. Then you get into dungeon dressing. So if you just need some random fucking object in your dungeon. This one you could use at the table probably fairly easily. So this room has a layer of dirt on the floor. Why? I don't know. It's just there. This next room has a key in it. What is it for? I don't know. This next room has scattered pebbles or gravel. You know, I don't know. But here you go. Unusual corpses. You walk into a room and there's a corpse on the floor of a giant frog. Are there any other frogs in the dungeon? No. there's just a giant frog corpse here. Or the corpse of a malformed human. And then you can roll on the corpse of malformations. What's weird about this human? Oh, well, he has tentacles. That's pretty weird. Then you have weird dungeon dressing if you want more weirdness. Such as ventriloquism or sound displacing effect. If you need to roll for the condition of an item, or the lighting in a room, or a piece of furniture in a room. This room has a display case in it. What's in it? Roll on the small item table. It's got a fan in it, and some twine, and a lock of hair. Again, it's like, don't really use this just on the fly, because it's gonna just seem insane and entirely too random. This is all meant to just kind of spark your creativity, as I said. There's a big table of hallucinogens. I mean, just everything you could possibly conceive. There's so many miscellaneous tables here. It's like, oh, I'm struggling. I need to come up with a fucking piece of jewelry here. I need some kind of jewelry. What kind of, how about an ear cuff? Don't even know what that is, but it's an ear cuff. And it's got an inlaid, turquoise. Decorated. There's some decorated wood panelings here. And it's just, yeah, anyways. Then you get into non-dungeon adventure design, such as aerial adventures. Like a cloud castle or a cliffside. Or floating island, a high mountain, top of a tower. And then you've got problems specifically related to, an aerial location, such as the aerial predators that need to be destroyed. And then events that could occur in the air. Floating vegetation. Things you could see from far away. A type of flying vehicle. Flying structures. The owner of a flying structure. This flying castle is owned by a powerful religious leader, non-human. So on and so forth. Then you get into castles and ruins, of course. There's going to be loads of tables related to that kind of stuff. As you would imagine, the people inside the castle. Then the city stuff, as we went over. Blah, blah, blah. Planar adventures. There's going to be alternate dimensions, alternate planes, where laws of physics are entirely different, non-existent. So all that stuff is in here as well. Underwater adventures comes up sometimes, could be really interesting. This includes shipwrecks and things like that. Unusual seaweed. So you encounter some seaweed down there that has huge pods that can be floated upward. Waterborne adventures. So this is going to be ship-based stuff above the water. Or on the water. And the cargo of a ship. This ship's carrying just a big load of honey. Wilderness adventures. So this is stuff in forests and, groves. Blah, blah, blah. So you might need to roll for some unusual plants. you know, I'm saying all this stuff and I feel like I'm sounding kind of mocking or something, but I think all of this is pretty awesome. And I think a lot of these, like, just random tables like this can add a lot of flavor to otherwise what could be a very generic adventure, you know? If you're in the wilderness and it's just like, I just want to spice this up a little bit, this adventure up a little bit from just like common tropes and cliches. Like, okay, let's say that this area of the forest has a very unusual plant, you know, and so it's berries. There's berries in this area that, you know, they have a strange striped pattern to them. And they can be used as a means of communication by the plant, possibly only with other plants, possibly other species, or even humans. And so you might just spin off from that and say, okay, there's weird berries here, striped berries that if eaten allow you to have a limited form of telepathy or something. And that's just, you know, a little unique feature of a location. I think that's good. I think that's all good. Desert wilderness. Look at all these tables just for building an interesting oasis. Okay. Unusual sands. Desert animals. Forest wilderness, hills, mountain wilderness tables, swamp wilderness tables. And then there's just like a collection of like every table all at the end. So it is padded a little bit just by having all the tables repeated again at the end. But still, it's an insane book. This video really went off the rails here. Honestly though, I feel like I'm probably kind of done. I think this is a good stopping point for the campaign. They achieved their goal. They got to the city, they got a shop, they had to do a lot of dirty deeds to get it in the end, or maybe they didn't have to, but they did. They killed a lot of people. But now they can kind of retire until Balance ends up destroying the entire city with a dark ritual. Yeah, I mean, I started this little Hexcrawl campaign because I wanted to do a Hexcrawl and I wanted to test out utility spells and flexibility within Weird Wizard, and I think we did all that. So it's kind of a good stopping point. I really don't want to do it where I keep going until I just don't feel like recording another one and then it just leaves it unended. So I like to have a definitive ending. And I think this is as good as we're going to get. If I go back out into the wilderness and go crawling around, you know, it might just end suddenly. So yeah, we didn't actually do almost anything in this video, but we got our shop. I mean, that's good enough. Yeah, so I'm probably good for a while for solo role manging. Like everything that I do, I kind of go in waves of just like, I'm really into this right now. This is all I want to do for a while. And then I finish it. It's like, okay, I don't need to touch that again for a long time. And then I do, and then it's like, oh my, this is all I want to do for a while. So I'm sure solo role manging will be back at some point, and I'll just be obsessed for a while. Maybe with Weird Wizard, probably with a different system entirely, and I'm just like, yes, we need to do this. I'm very apprehensive about starting it, but I would really like to do some other kind of system, some other kind of genre. Because I don't exclusively play, or I didn't used to exclusively play D&D or fantasy stuff. We played a lot of Call of Cthulhu, or I DM'd a lot of Call of Cthulhu. We played a lot of Cyberpunk. That was probably our second most common thing, was Cyberpunk games. We did a bunch of superhero stuff. And I'm apprehensive about it because the same way I was apprehensive about starting solo role-playing in general. I just don't know how it will go. I don't know how to do it, really. Fantasy now I'm like really accustomed to, and I have so many resources for it. I have, you know, it's the most common genre. There's so many maps and supplements and modules and resources. If I were to just start up like a cyberpunk game, it's a lot trickier. But it is a lot of fun. I really do love playing that kind of genre, where I get sniper rifles and I get to hack things, and you get this like near future kind of setting. It's just so different. I don't really care for Shadowrun that much, like that kind of setting, because I don't need orcs. I don't need magic. My magic is a fucking assault rifle. That's magic enough. So yeah, I mean, we had so many great like cyberpunk games. A lot of our best memories of playing come from those kind of games. So I would like to do that at some point. I'm just very apprehensive, and fantasy's really just kind of comforting. But we'll see. So yeah, for now, my name is Mang. This has been Solo Role Manging Shadow of the Weird Wizard generic Hexcrawl number 6279. And I'll see you fine folks around.